Hello and welcome to a brand new episode. This week it is Unwrapping Sustainability with a highly experienced leader in the business, none other than Sebastian Munden. Welcome along today, Sebastian.
Hi, nice to be with you, Chris.
I think for our audience, perhaps if it's just a quick background on yourself, maybe just 60 seconds about you and perhaps your career so far.
Yes, well, hello, everybody. I'm Sebastian Munden, and I'm the chair of WRAP, the Waste and Resources Action Programme, and I'm the chair of Net Zero. So these two activities are effectively trying to promote the circular economy, and in the case of WRAP, tackle waste and the causes of climate change, and in the case of Net Zero, to create a more sustainable advertising industry in the way work is made, but also for the superpower of advertising to accelerate net zero economy. But before this, I worked at Unilever for about 32 years, and my last role there was as a CEO for the UK and Irish business, which I did for about 5 years. And I had roles there running the European and Australasian laundry business. I worked in the US, in Hamburg, in Germany, in Netherlands, and in Singapore, doing a variety of marketing roles, I would say.
How did your involvement really get started with that net zero?
I suppose it was, having had a career in marketing, I always, one of the things that attracted me into marketing was the ability to be involved in the small things of everyday life that could make people's lives just that little bit better. And particularly the work in the laundry products category. I work with some amazing people who kind of really opened my eyes to, the choices that manufacturers can make, the choices they can make for better ingredients, more sustainable ingredients. So I suppose I got into that thinking, in Unilever, and very much focused on product. There are many kinds of marketers in this world. I was always the one that got excited about new products, invention, factories, and all that kind of stuff. Right. The groundswell of people in advertising who wanted to be part of something that would be a force for good, and really wanted advertising to step up. And at Net Zero, what we try to do is bring all the best brains of the industry together to figure out, standards, methodologies, calculations, to make that then shareable, so that not everyone has to kind of start from scratch and do it on their own.
Perfect. I just wanted to move on to another topic, if I could now, Sebastian, and that being the UK Plastics Pact.
Well, indeed. I was very fortunate in the first year that I was running Unilever's UK and Irish business. We were working with WRAP and the Department for Environment, and the Secretary of State at that time was Michael Gove. And a group of companies, manufacturers like Unilever, but also retailers like Tesco's and Sainsbury's, we came together to form the UK Plastics Pact in 2018. And we set targets for 2025, and there were 4 targets. The first was the elimination of problematic, unnecessary, single-use plastic through design, so designing out or finding alternatives. The second was that all plastic that was used would be 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable. The third was that 70% of materials would be recycled or composted. And the fourth, that 30% would be the average kind of content of recycled materials in plastic items. And, obviously since then, we've had COVID, we've had Brexit, we've had all kinds of different things to contend with. But actually, many of those are on a good pathway. The average recycled content is currently at about 22%, and it seems to be increasing. The hardest one actually is the 70% recycling rate. Recycling rates are very much stuck at about 50-something% in England. They're higher in Wales. working with the Welsh government, really have seen success in getting those recycling rates in Wales ahead. But to be honest, until extended producer responsibility is landed and properly implemented, those recycling rates are going to be very, very hard to move. So there's quite a lot that has to happen there.
Is that having to work with spending more time working with government agencies to support that?
The government have to bring forward a plan, and the plan has currently been delayed. It needs to be a plan that essentially, over time, we stop thinking of the process of collecting recycled materials from curbside as a part of the kind of waste end of life, and start to think of it as the materials procurement of industry. And that means that you have to kind of switch out a little bit, kind of who's running it, how are you making choices about prioritization of materials. So what it requires is for government to give some very clear, simple targets, and then for business and industry to run it in a way that maximizes the efficiency of the collection and the recycling of the materials to get those back to the start of the supply chain. So thinking of that as your kind of feedstock ingredient system rather than your kind of end of life waste system.
Right. Okay. That's an interesting way of looking at it.
It's a profound change. So if you take personal bottles, they're made at Port Sunlight, the historical home of Unilever, and the plastic recycled plastic content of those bottles comes from a plant somewhere near Bristol, and the material comes from curbside collection. It's cleaned up, deodorized, and chopped up, and put into pellets, and it goes up to Port Sunlight, and it's back in personal bottles. Right. So it's a really inspiring kind of simple system. And obviously, if we could increase the amount of that plastic that's collected at curbside, that absolutely reduces the need for for virgin material, and get much more value out of the material. I mean, the big challenge at the moment is on plastic film. When I look at our bin here at home, with the food waste kind of out in separated, and with all the materials that are collected for recycling, what's really obvious is what's left in those, in the black bin bag,
right,
as it were, and that's film. Now, there are different ways of trying to solve this. Some people try to go plastic free, and that has significant challenges, but also potentially hygiene challenges as well. But actually, what we really need to do is within the framework of the materials that are consistently collected and processed, we need to build that circular economy for the collection, sorting, because sorting film, they blow everywhere. So that's not easy. And then processing them. And then here's the really tricky part, which is that because of the cost of sorting being so prohibitive, and the fact that in the end that material will probably have to end up in rigid plastic bottles, the economics of that don't work. So we have to try and find ways to fix the economics. And what you see is can be extremely helpful in that is to kind of work together to try and build the various parts of that circular economy to try and figure out how to get the economics to work.
But I just want to talk a little about people and skills and how that can be relevant. Because I know you're quite an advocate for diverse backgrounds in the business, the importance of work experience, that type of thing. I was wondering if you could provide perhaps some ideas.
Yeah, I think the place you have to start is that the modern world is very complex, and also in the Western sort of European context, we have many communities in our countries, and it's very difficult, particularly if you're thinking about consumer-facing companies. to not generalize about people, but really understand the true richness and diversity of the people that we're serving. So that if you like, that for consumer product companies, there's an economic kind of incentive to deeply understand all the different communities that you can serve with your products. And the experience teaches that having representation of all those communities within your marketing department will enrich and enhance your ability to serve. Let's face it, at the moment in countries like the UK, we're looking at a world where that it's a bit of a fight for talent to try and get the best people into your business. And it's definitely a bit of a seller's market. So for the best talent, companies will have to make sure that they're really looking everywhere for the best talent and not just in the usual old places.
Was I right? Did I read or did I watch a video of yourself? I had a note around work experience. You talked a lot about, I don't know, was the internships?
Yes, and I have served some time, on the steering committee of a fantastic organization, which was a businesses and now government departments as well, all coming together to give young people work experience, to try and cut the knot of no experience, no work, no work, no experience. And how do you overcome that? So Movement to Work was created in order to give people who may not have come from a family background where working in the types of environments of the members, the supporting companies, was within their family experience. So it allows people to do that. And we were big supporters at Unilever. I think Unilever still are big supporters of Movement to Work. It's a fabulous activity, giving thousands of young people experiences of work, which will help them get work
Right.
in the future. And I would see that's pre-apprenticeship. So then you've got apprenticeships then as the next stage, and of course these days degree apprenticeships for quite skilled and technical roles, and all of this creating an ecosystem in companies of learning and working, which is just such a valuable mix. And it kind of breaks down that sort of cliff edge between tertiary education and the world of work in a way that's super helpful. And yes, it brings a sort of specialism earlier into a young person's life, but that also comes with it a kind of sense of, I know what I'm doing and I'm kind of being prepared for roles that are needed in industry.
Be really interesting to get your perhaps insights and how technology playing a role in achieving sustainability goals. What do you see? What have you seen out there in recent years?
Well, I suppose maybe let's start with some of the unsolved challenges. So, these are the goals to go for, if people are so motivated. I mean, I think if particularly in consumer packaged goods, what we see is essentially a one-way supply chain, which goes from, the kind of source of ingredients through to sort of processing, through to manufacturing, packing, and out to retailers. And of course, that's been refined over years to be inch perfect and just in time. I think one of the important things that we learned from COVID, but probably also from Brexit, is that we didn't think of supply chain resilience. We just thought of supply chain efficiency. So I think just to broaden that thought with sustainability, if we're going to move into a world of refillable containers and reusable containers, because containers are just too valuable and too long lasting to use once, we're going to need to create a very different type of supply chain, one where it's not just all to store and then the consumer does the offtake. We're going to need to get things back from store and cleaned up and refilled. This is a monumental challenge because There are very, very few supply chains in consumer products that have been designed to do that. And most of the examples are in the drinks industry and the drink sector, where deposit return schemes are in operation, like in Germany and some of the other North European countries.
Right.
So I think there's a big, big challenge in technical solutions for a kind of circular supply chain in consumer products. But it's also, I'm just thinking about, the amount of materials that get discarded in the sort of process of creating food products, consumer products, starting at the farm. And we're talking beyond wonky vegetables now. We're talking about, the bits that people can't eat. So what's going to happen to them? Can we make the containers out of that stuff? You hear a lot of people now talking about second harvest, materials, made out of the other bits. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurial, technical invention to help create the net zero economy and accelerate the business models.
And you even do see some really remarkable things surfacing in the last few years.
Chris, I think what happens is that you, as a person, you have to kind of go through the stages. And the first stage is the case for change, and do I accept and understand that actually things need to be done differently? And then you go through the, well, what are those changes and how can we deliver them? But if you can't get past the case for change, you never get on to the invention and the reinvention so it's such an important point that and it doesn't really matter what your motivation is. Fear of being left behind or the desire to lead, that you have to go through the kind of the gate of openness to doing it differently. And that is often a team activity to help the whole team get to that point where tinkering on the current system may not be sufficient. And I can understand it. Everyone wants to try and just optimize what's working brilliantly already.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where you have that dawning realization that tinkering will not be enough. This is not a case of efficiency and optimization. It's a case of reinvention.
Do you see that a bit, that perhaps some companies are already doing quite a lot, but they haven't sort of been able to bring it into perhaps a cohesive strategy?
I think sometimes companies are nervous about putting their head above the parapet and talking about the things that they're doing because they feel either slightly inadequate about the things that they're not doing because, and this is my point about, that perfection can be an impediment to progress. But also these days, companies need to serve everybody. They want to serve all their customers, all their shareholders, and they're very nervous about getting drawn into a sort of culture wars type debate, which is an agenda they can't shape or impact. So they just become a statistic in a sort of culture war debate that they have no control over. And I think that's extremely sad. And that's why I think, the companies that work with WRAP, one of the things that WRAP always says is, look, we are evidence-based. We're fact-based. We work with everybody. We work with all kinds of governments, all kinds of companies, and we're fearless in being led by the evidence. And I think that's really what everyone has to do, because if you're not evidence-based, then the danger is that you become the unwitting kind of walk-on part in somebody else's drama.
Just to wrap up, Sebastian, if you could just share, what's something that's really got you excited now at the moment that you're working on, perhaps throughout the remainder of 2023?
We did an impact assessment for 2020, which was the year we had the most complete data for. And we realized that our annual impact is the removal of about 5 million tons of CO2 equivalent from the atmosphere, working with all our partners. And we just said to ourselves, how could we make that bigger? What would it take for that to be 50 million tons? How long would it take to get to that sort of impact? So it's super exciting. We have a marvelous executive team at WRAP and a new CEO in Harriet Lamb. And, I'm just so excited about how we can bring that expertise to work with more partners across the world.
And it sounds like the work you're doing is wonderful, and I can see why you're so passionate about it, Sebastian.
So you've got to start with a point where you say, how does this fit my success model? How can I both be successful, serve my customers, and do the right thing for the planet? Working at Unilever, Paul Polman always used to say, there's no healthy business on a sick planet, and you can see that. So that's why thinking about your business in terms of all the stakeholders, because if you get it right for all the stakeholders, you'll get it right for the shareholders.